Thank you very much, Jessica, for your presentation. It was very interesting and a lot of connections to the previous speakers about the problems of neoliberalism or the system of neoliberalism that the Nordic country has been submerging into in the last decades. As I said before, in the beginning, neoliberalism is not only an economic theory, but mainly a civilizatory project. And as a civilizatory project, the idea is to construct actually a population adapted to its interest in one way or the other, through education, through the ideology of work, for example, or the state, the way they organize the social settings and the political possibilities to do something, and so on. So in this session, the idea is to what are we going to do? I mean, where do we go from here? And the summary, I mean, it's quite a big thing to summarize a lot of points, but one of the things that I would like to point out is not a summary, but probably is a synthesis of how both, probably in different ways. I mean, each country has its own history and a related history to each other in the Nordic countries. But the idea with the system is that it has become very much the idea of individuals as a point of departure. Yeah? It is the individual, and it's something that I meet quite a lot of when I teach at the university among my students, where they say when I start to highlight questions about structural problems or structures or systems, that they say, well, until now we have only been studying about individuals. Yeah? So it's something going on in the education of social work, not only, but I would say among the whole spectrum of at the university. So one of the things is the individualization, the ideology of the individual, but also the fragmentation. Yeah? That's something that I have been listening from the beginning in the first session until now, is the fragmentation of three different things: the social, I mean, the fragmentation of the social, the fragmentation of history, and the fragmentation of the individual also. And I will say, regarding the social, which is one of the main issues that I think has been highlighted, is that the first objective of the fragmentation is to construct cohesion and solidarity and make it rivalry and competition instead. So instead of focusing on cohesion and solidarity, nowadays what we get the whole time through different politics or through different policies is actually the question of competing, to get into the labor market, to compete in different ways, as it was highlighted in the first session, is to, well, people that has been out of the labor market, they will have to get some kind of education in order to compete once again in the labor market. I mean, this is the whole idea of the neoliberal system, to put the individual into a process, a constant process of renewing the ideas. And that has to do with the fragmentation also of the individual. Yeah? The individual has no anymore any kind of goal as such, but different goals, in a way that if you are not enough for this work, you will have to do another work, and etc., etc., etc. So that's what I get actually of all these sessions. And of course, the question of education, I mean, is central to what is going to happen for social workers in the future. And with that, I think that because most of us, or one part at least of this group are working as educators at the university, I really would like to press a little bit more about what to do with educations, because on the one part we have not only the question of research and getting research funds from foundations or from financiers that wants to have certain kind of words, certain kind, they what we are into is being framed by an idea of what it is, what the economic finances want us to do. But what can we do besides that? That's research. Pedagogy. What kind of pedagogy do we look for? What do we want to have at the university? What do we want to teach actually? And I will be short about this. One of the examples that I have is that besides this one that most of students wants to to focus on no ones, but having focus on the individuals and not much about structures, is that every time that I have to start with a course, I have to say social work is not. We depart from the idea that human rights are central to social work, and that's something that is taken a little bit, and they start to ask questions. What are we not objective instead? So the question here is what do we do with also populations that have been immersed in the idea of individuality, in the ideas that save yourself, we want to get into the labor market and so on, which is of course important too, to survive in this society. So how pedagogically can we also transform social work education? And the floor is open now for that. I'm second year social work student. Right. Okay. We got a message from Michael. I'm a second year social work student in the UK. The inclusion of critical and radical perspectives in my curriculum is tokenist, at least in my experience. Seems inclusion of this perspective is dependent on the funding model that for that particular institute. For example, the influence of market forces. It seems some would like all ideological influence removed from social work education. Masoud.
Thank you. Yes, based off my own experience, and I, in my recent books, which is going to be published in a couple of months, I interviewed many researchers and educators in the universities in Sweden and asked them what happens with their educations. Everybody agreed that something is changing very much. If during the early 2000s, it was a possibilities to have critical literature and even some radical literature in social work education, it's completely away. As also Marcus mentioned about depoliticization of social work education. I mean, everything, you are completely right. Everything which has to do with ideology, with values, with having human values, global values, and so on, human values in education is removing and accusing to be ideological. It seems that the neoliberalism is not an ideology. Liberalism is not an ideology. Our political parties have no ideologies. The whole system of social welfare system is based on ideology. I mean, ideology is part of our life, but they said that everything should be just moved. Why? Because you have to be teacher which just obey the orders of the politicians and market around you to teach social work. I think it's completely what's happening now. And of course, we are fighting against it, and we have many teachers who are fighting against this. What I wanted to say is that there are teachers who really want to have, educators who really want to have those literature included in courses, but the power and forces of those who are against are very, very strong. I mean, today you have the administration in universities, which makes universities in chain. I mean, Henry Giraud, the Canadian researcher, wrote a book about universities in chain. And just talking about that, we have now an university industrial complex, university security complex, which makes it very difficult to have this, I mean, the radical and critical ideas in education. Of course, it's possible, but it's becoming much worse than earlier time. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood. We have another question here from Don. I'm a social worker educator in Boston. Do we really need more research studies? Question mark. How do we get social workers involved in building the multiracial working class movement we need to win the world we all deserve? That's a question that we can discuss also. But before I will give, probably Sophia had something to say about what Masood said, and then we can get back to Don's question.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. I was thinking about what Masood said about how neoliberalism is not considered an ideology, because what frightens me as a social worker is also how quickly we adapt. Because like every other social worker I meet, they treat every client and every patient as the ones who are in charge of the entire situation. Like they caused all the problems that got them there, and they're the only ones who can solve the problem as well. And I also find myself sometimes thinking in those terms, like, well, you know, it's your responsibility. So so I just feel like a day like today, when we can get together and talk to each other and just remind ourselves of the bigger picture and why we're all in social work and share perspectives, and that is just, and like, how do I say, you know, the small acts of resistance that we do in our everyday, whether it's work or like we're doing research, everything contributes to doing the kind of social work that we want to do. So I just feel like a day like today is one way of making change.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. Now, yes, I mean, it has to do also with this question that Don has about how do we get social workers involved in building multiracial working class movement, for example. We need to win the war we all deserve. And I think that has to do a little bit with one question that we have, I mean, it has been a little bit at the margin of our talk, and it's the question of politics. And the political structure and the political system and the political field that we are into, how it is connected to that, because sometimes, I mean, what I see is that social workers, social scientists work very, very much parallel to the political spectrum of actually doing politics, but also trying to influence politicians. But is that the right way, or we have to go back to social political movements way? I don't know if you get me. So, and I think it has to do with Don, because how we build the multiracial working class we need to change the world. Masood, yes.
Well, this discussion we had earlier too. I mean, do we need more research to say that the society is racist? Do we need more research to say that neoliberalism is a global civilizational project, as you mentioned, Adrian, in the opening of the conference? I think, you know, there are people and researchers now in the world who say, who use the concept of tititainment, you know, this Brzezinski security advisor to Jimmy Carter in the United States, saying that, yeah, let young people looking at TV series, films, Hollywood makes it, this disco culture during the 80s and so on, don't let them think politically and just let them continue. Really, it was a policy which was very much introduced and reinforced during Reagan and Thatcher administration, and it continued, of course, afterwards. Research, I think, my readings of the recent research is that even within the research area, government and funders providing money to do much more of the same. I mean, I just looked at the PhD projects in Sweden, and how many questions that already have been researched, and we already from now with what the answers are, and how many of those have not a single critical and radical perspective. So yes, you can have huge research, but not research who in any way attacks or put the system in question. Well, the answer to question is very difficult, but at the same time, I can say that, yes, there is a policy in the neoliberal providing fundings for research, aiming at making, as some of the politicians in the United States have said in Giro's book, Universities in Chains, let them do research and more research and more research, and we do, politicians, whatever we want with them. We know in Sweden, just to finish, we know in Sweden when Adrian and me have been engaged in this governmental inquiry, a researcher at that time told me that in Sweden, for instance, it was a tradition of the welfare state to ask researchers to do research and give us suggestions to make the welfare states better. It has changed in 90s, and really in the mid of 80s. And she said she looked at many of these governmental inquiries. About 90% of them, politicians do not listen to them. They do whatever they want. They can just say, no, that's not correct. During the recent policies for combating COVID-19, we have seen the same. Researchers say something, politicians something else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Masoud. Is someone else wants to highlight some point of view or something? Marcus, please.
Yeah, and now I want to get back to the questions from Dawn there. I was thinking about it. The first question, do we really need more research studies? I'm not sure if I misunderstand something here language-wise. But I do believe we need more research studies because it goes back to the fragmentization, really, because of neoliberalism, that I think makes it difficult to sometimes catch what's really going on and what groups are interacting in different ways connected to social issues. I've been doing ethnographic research at the food bank here in Sweden for a year now, and it's really, and I still get amazed by how different groups of people are in need of food in a welfare state as Sweden today. So I think we still need new research projects to highlight those issues. But the second part is to get social workers involved. I think we all need to get involved. I need as educators as well into building these kind of movements, because the fragmentization it makes it difficult to create a more homogenic movement, maybe that we were used to in some ways. I mean, the working class movement and the anti-racist movement and the feminist movement or whatever. So I think we need to be better as educators to include people into our both research and to include them in our education in different ways. To be able to get social workers involved early on during their education. We have worked like that for quite a long time where I work, and I think it's a really good way to get social workers and ourselves involved in social issues.
Thank you, Marcus. Linda.
Thank you. There are a number of, I think, very, very important themes that we are discussing, trying to wrap this kind of very interesting but also challenging session up. So let me share with you some of my thoughts. I do think that that we need more research. I mean, being a scientist and a scholar myself, of course, I would say that. But also, I mean, being an activist, being an engaged citizens, you know, that work in many other spaces outside my professional life, I would say it as well. I mean, and we have actually, you know, we have pointed to this. For instance, I would want that we know more about why is it that, or how is it that social workers react to their working conditions. I mean, we had 4 great social workers narratives. So we need to provide. I don't think we know enough about this. I mean, the profession and social work profession is differentiated. You know, we have those that work within the legal jurisdiction, and they have a specific. We know about that, but we also have, you know, community work, solidarity, activism. You know, social workers are there, both in the Nordic countries and worldwide. So exploring actually how, since this is our theme, how neoliberalism works in the individual social worker works, you know, in their kind of collectivity works on a more systemic level is extremely important. And we don't know enough about that. Secondly, I think that, you know, I'm not a social worker researcher, you know, as you know, very, very kind of conventional defined. I work in social innovation, social entrepreneurship, civic society organization, in the hybrid, in a field of hybridity. So if I look to international inspirations, then I see that phenomena as solidarity economy, as a much more collective social movement approach is very, very strong. And actually it's also strong in the Nordic countries. It's coming, it's kind of emerging. And we don't know much about that as well. We know from the history that this has been a significant part of the Nordic countries, but we don't know much about how the new phenomena, the late modernity, also inspires such movements. Some of them collapses again. Some of them are very short and very brief, but nevertheless, some of them are actually quite influential. So we have a number of these, you know, things going on in Denmark, and we should research into these. So they are actually part of new formations that are quite positive, I have to say. So I do think that we need more knowledge. We also need knowledge about how social workers can work with their clients. You know, can they do that, and how do they do that? What is the outcome of that? What are the perspectives? So, yeah, a lot to do, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Is anybody else that wants to highlight something here? Sophia?
I just want to say quickly about what Linda said about that we need to know more about how like new public management works in different types of social work. And that what I miss is, because of course we need to know more about this, but I'm missing the opportunity to connect, like with my social work colleagues from different places in the social work field. Because when we get together and when we actually share experiences, then we can do something. Like knowledge is super important, but also just sharing experiences and supporting each other. That's just that's something I feel like we need more of, because we're so fragmentized. Thank you.
Masoud, and then we go to Jasmine.
Yeah, Sophia, I think you raise a very important question here. We had a discussion for several years ago about the role of social worker organizations or unions, SSR and others, what they do and how they do and what they should do. We know that it's very different if you have that in Argentina, in Greece, or in UK and so on, and you have here. My experience is that many of these organizations are in very close connection with the government and politicians. And the head of them, many of them, either they are members of parties or in a way, in different way, they influence this organization, independency of organizations of social workers. It's very important, of course, to have alternative, exactly what we do from here. As Sophia said, I think it's very important to have alternative rooms for discussions, for exchange of experiences, for mobilization. How we go, I mean, we know today that this power structure in society tries to make us individuals. If some social worker in a social office is against something which is very neoliberal or a policy there, so the problem is her or him, because they are saying that you are the problem. What happens if we had a strong organization which could support this resistance, discuss resistance, support it in universities, in social work practices, organizations, in civil society? I think we could be much more strong to meet the neoliberal changes and we have today. I mean, we know that the way that neoliberal changes make us individualized also influence social movements. We have social movements burning cars, attacking, making gangs. These are results of marginalization, which makes it very difficult to have a strong social movement which aims at changes and where social workers can really have the lead, because they know the problem, they are working with the problem each day, they are working with the consequences of this neoliberal structural changes. So we globally, and of course, we are also a global profession as social workers. So all those elements can help us to mobilize and stop or reverse the development of the neoliberal destruction of societies, environmental destruction, social destructions, economic destruction, and so on. I think it's very important to have rooms for such discussions. And I hope that, I think that SWAN, for instance, is one of those rooms that we can get together and discuss different questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Masoud. We have Yasmin here saying in the chat, as a social worker for many years who has advocated the rights of service users, there is little support available for workers who fight for social justice. How can we support social workers to become more radical in their practice when there is so little support available? This is also, this also leads into education, where little support is also available, but emphasis is placed upon highlighting anti-oppressive and bad practice. Someone that wants to comment on how can we support social workers to become more radical in their practice when there is so little support available? And I think we were into some that Sophia highlighted here, the need of spaces where radical thinking can flower in a way. Something else that you think is important? I think it's a good. I mean, it's a very good question. How can we support social workers, Sophia?
I don't have the perfect answer to that, but something that we do. I'm part of an organization where we meet regularly and just talk about struggles we've had and like practice and give each other tips on how to face them in the workplace. And we train ourselves to notice the small acts of resistance that we do from day to day. And I find it very helpful to keep, like for myself, to keep myself on track to be a radical and critical social worker. So just like in the small things, talk to colleagues and stuff. But as a student, when I studied to be a social worker, it was really difficult to find people to share those experiences with. I found it.
Someone else that wants to, Masood?
Well, yes, as I said, one of the ways that we can do that for the next generation, of course, is education. And through education could create, I mean, as Jessica presented now, the results are very obvious. The critical and radical perspective are just excluded. And they are going to try to do it, of course. The other is that I think the time is now mature to see that we cannot continue as we did. We know that marginalization is increasing, social problems are increasing, social problems, as the roots of the global roots of social problems are very obvious. The local situation of social problems and so on. I mean, all those we know today more and more obvious. The way to make it radical is first to have a commitment to which society do we want to have. We want to change the structure of neoliberalism, which is killing us. Neoliberalism is killing us, not only through directly, it's creating a small wars. I mean, but just that perspective, they call it small wars. It's not Second World War or First World War. It has created small wars, which is killing more people than Second World War. I mean, it's the statistics about that. Ethnic conflicts, racial conflicts, racialization of the people in the world, the return of colonialism, and so on and so on. I mean, this is a structural transformation. These are structural transformations that are very important to have knowledgeable. If we know that, and we know that now social workers in the world are getting together for a radical perspective. I mean, the answer is really SWAN. SWAN International, which we are members of, created just last summer. Now, people in the leading positions who started in Glasgow says we cannot manage it. All countries want to be part of this because they say the traditional places for discussions, for organization of social work are not meeting our needs. We need much more radical perspectives. So that's why I think we have the ground. So we need organization. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood. Linda, do you want to comment on that or, yeah?
Yes, thank you. No, I just want to point to how the development, these very important questions, and also thank you to Masood for elaborating on SWAN and why it has been created and the importance of it. But if we're thinking about how to create spaces for reflection of critical, social work, and to actually, make a difference, it has to be all over, from the start until the end. That's the way. If we look at other types of students that has a much more critical, reflexive professional practice, this would be my answer. And we've heard quite a lot about it. So this starts with the education. It starts with the schools actually, but okay, the foundational education, as Jessica said, critical curriculum, critical learning, critical spaces. That there isn't just, one mainstream social work method or methodology. There's a variety of method and methodologies. There's national, there's Nordic, there's international. So it starts there, and it starts by, providing collective spaces for the students, to discuss, to work, to reach out to citizens and welfare service people, bring them in, reach out, understand them as human beings, with dreams and thoughts and lives, and then it has to continue. So when they get their first jobs, they should be met by, of course, positions, professionality, authority, and what they can and what they cannot. But there should be professional groups and collective discussions, as part of the professional practice, in which the newcomers should be invited in and should be embraced by, so that social work professionals, have, a collective profession that they can actually develop, and then further on that social work professionals come together from different parts, because community social workers are very different from those of us or those of you that work in the municipality, that work in the legal departments, and again, in education institutions, with families. So to foster a way of discussing and being together in which that you can support each other. So it has to be all along the way, and the unions has to improve. The unions, that's part of it as well, because they are the ones to be the formal representation, and they should advocate strongly for such events and ways of working together.
Thank you, Linda. We have a question here that from Simona. She says, I'm a first year social work student here in Sweden, and together with other students, we are trying to build up a radical students movement, an arena where we can discuss different themes and open up a room for discussion. Which suggestions and tips, according to your experiences, would you give us in order to make effective and reasonable actions? It's a very good question. Please.
Can I just start to
Yes.
make it much more complex?
Yeah.
Well, we who have been or have been part of the university world, we know that the student movement in a time for decades ago, in the last century, you can say, in 60s and 70s, was a radical movement aiming at the democratization of education, radical changes, reinforcement of welfare state in social work, together with many researchers who were committed to a classless society, as you want to say. The first professors in social work in Sweden, we know those were very committed to changing the whole structure of society. Radical social work should go to the streets, all those books. But it has changed, as I said, during 80s. And many of the student unions today, really, we know that some of our students that have been radical have problems with those unions too, not only students and the structure of universities, it's about those. So I don't have any answer directly to this or that, but I know that SWAN also has a student movement of the members of students. It's an organization of students, teachers, educators, researchers, social workers, and civil society activists. So it's not just academics in this organization. And I hope that, and we have discussed in SWAN, that we can provide students their own rooms to discuss their problems and organize themselves. How to do it? I know that people in these different universities are small groups, but they are not organized. So I don't know how to do it. But I just wanted to say that the old student unions are not the right, correct way to go. That's why, in my experience, many of them are politically interested in making careers and so on, everything that everybody knows.
Thank you, Masoud. Sophia, you were having conversations here in the chat about Simona's questions. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this, for example, this network based in Gothenburg?
I always want to talk.
As a suggestion for Simona, that's mine.
Yeah, because I asked her privately, and she is based in Gothenburg. So it's more or less what Masoud said. It's a way to organize students and social workers, and we've been around for 12 years this year, like having ups and downs, but more like taking the step from the theoretical to the practical. Yeah.
Right.
If I may, just one say, that's very interesting. I mean, what you are discussing here, I mean, Sophia writes here that it's everyday resistance. We know in universities, in social work organizations, in our offices, everywhere, the guy or the one who protests and say against this new liberal, I don't know, 10-head animal. So the guy is defined as deviant, as problem. I mean, the recent article published now, Adrián, I think, shared on Facebook, it's a study on that you get not support. Even your friends and your colleagues in the same organization are afraid of the problems that they can also be subjected to. That's why I think it's very important to also, one important question, how we support each other in small microcosmos to this microcosmos to the microcosmos. I mean, how we can support each other in the same organization, in the same room, in the same seminar, in the same classroom. I mean, it's of course very important. I agree with Sophia's perspective here. I think it's everyday resistance. We should support each other. We should not be afraid of just look away, say, oh, I'm going also to be accused of that. Stigmatization, or this system of symbolic violence, really, which is saying that, oh, he's problem maker. She creates problems. And she has so radical ideas and so on. Thank you.
Sophia, do you want to comment on?
Yeah, just as a comment to what you were saying, is that we and everyone I speak to at my job, basically, it's like we're all afraid and we're loyal and we don't know what's going to happen. And just to be the first one to speak up is frightening, because we're all like good workers. We sit there, we do what we're supposed to, right? But then again, everyone I speak to wants to do something else. We want to do more, we want to do better. And so we, in this organization, I'm part of, we practice ways to stand up for ourselves. And okay, so in this situation, what can you say? So when it comes, you're more comfortable with it. And those small things has been really helpful and appreciated by the ones involved.
Right. I just want to change a little bit now to focus on the educators. I mean, the teachers at the university, the program of social work, what to do in such a field where neoliberalism and other systems of oppression that highlights in different ways, within the neoliberal system. What to do? How are we going to, or do we need to organize within the universities? Do we need to stand against I don't know, structures within the universities together with students or not, or what to do? Is our job a place to in that sense? So what to do? Some ideas. Marcus, I think that you want to say something there. Yeah.
No, I'm just, as I said, I'm too critical to even think about something positive. But I mean, I do think we need to mobilize. I think we need to be better at mobilizing, and across, as I was talking about before, across the borders, really, between students and educators and researchers and so-called service users. And I think we need to find a different way of approaching what knowledge is and how to provide support to each other. I saw a comment there that someone was worried about people using exit strategies and stuff like that. I agree with that, and I think that's a problem in academia as well, but it's not a problem. I understand that people need to use exit strategies, and sometimes that's the biggest and the best resistance you can do, I think. But to prevent that kind of things to happen too often, I think we need to start mobilizing between universities and between lecturers and to support each other. Actually, I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a very important. Masoud, just one thing. The question is, in what way do we mobilize? That's the. I mean, what do we do? Because as everybody else in this system, this is a job, and I know some colleagues that have been punished because they have started trying to mobilize or have been very critical to the higher stages of the university or the curriculum or the syllabus and so on. So yeah.
May I just answer that? Because Masoud actually talked about that for a long time ago, I think, that there need to be a critical mass. Without a critical mass, we can't do anything. So I don't have this, we have to do it like this, I don't know. But we need to have a critical mass to be able to support and to change curriculum and to find a riktning, way.
Direction, yeah.
Direction, thank you. A direction together. So I don't have a quick fix, but I think it's very important to find that critical mass. Without it, it's very difficult, I think.
Thank you, Marcus. Rune, you had something there to say.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if you hear some shouting in the background, that will be my nieces. I'm sorry for that in advance. Yeah, but I find all of this very relevant, very important. However, what occurs to me is that sort of the connection between social work and its service users and service user-led movements actually hasn't been of a great importance in this discussion, or at least didn't take a lot of room, let's say it like that. And so I think what we find in general is that service users find movements where social workers take a very active role kind of disempowering a lot of the time. And I think social workers are sometimes quite, well, bad, I don't know, but not very good at adapting and changing the discourse and the practices in a way that service users feel able to contribute. And surely the people affected by all these changes are those that are able to offer those poignant analyses of them. So there's a process, I'm a social worker working with homeless people in Berlin, so this is something that as well there is a little bit of a problem. And I was just wondering whether the colleagues just had any questions or like suggestions how social work organizations can change in order to facilitate that better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rune. Linda, do you want to comment on that, or do you have something?
Yes, thank you. Well, I mean, I think I would like to put forward this, which is quite quite harsh, but nevertheless, I think that one of the problems that we face, all of us, with social work and social workers is actually that there are too many social workers, perhaps also researchers and the like, that are too system adapting, that are adapting and that are kind of adaptive to systems and not critical to systems. If you remember the social workers' narratives, they talked about loyalty. And of course, we all know about this, how difficult it is to be in a position, to be in a hierarchy, to be in an organizational, and would want to be understood as a good, well working, and trustworthy person. But actually, what we need to see much more is social workers working against the systems, from inside the systems. We need that as well. And that is actually a theme we should explore much more. And I understand that Sophia and others are talking about that and asking how can we do that. So we actually need to find ways of doing that and to do advocacy. And of course, this has been part of social work for centuries. But nevertheless, we need to find new forms and new ways of advocacy, within the era of neoliberalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I just wanted to read some of the text in the chat. Tisu says, one obstacle to make social workers involved in radical anti-capitalist movement is that a great deal of them mainly use loyalty and exit strategies. And the few who attempt to use voice or protest strategies are often fragmented and burn out quickly. That worries me, or this worries me. The burnout is one of the main problems among social workers also. Yeah. The other, Catherine Margaret, says, I'm currently working on my PhD in social work, and one of the areas I'm investigating is small-scale resistance and skills that are harnessed to engage in relationship-based practice in a highly bureaucratized environment in the face of managerial cultures. Examining this through a theoretical lens of power, it has really highlighted that although there are top-down constraints and limitations that we face every day, there remain spaces for impact and to challenge restrictive systems on a small scale. And the importance of collegial support and having self-confidence and holding our values to the fore has continued to come up. Thanks for this great discussion, everyone. And then with Catherine, the concern that I keep hearing is that this space for small-scale resistance and discretions is shrinking. And I thank you, Marcus, for reiterating the importance of collective action and mobilization, but how to do this effectively. And then some thanks later on. So these are the issues, and I see here is one. The struggles over what to do actually, what kind of organization or environment or spaces we need to create. Masoud, please.
Thank you. I think all those questions have something in common, which Rune also addressed. I mean, some of my colleagues and myself are working on the question of mobilization of those people we are working with, marginalized and the other people that we are working with, how social workers can mobilize those peoples. I mean, not only in a country like Sweden, it's a global question. So how we can do it, how we can organize them. Linda talked correctly about two different kind of social work and social work professionals. You have those in the municipal authorities working there. They, of course, have much less possibilities to ally themselves with their clients. It's a question of loyalty, as one of the people raised. So you have to be loyal to your working group, to your, chief, and to the municipal authority. And of course, as also Sophia mentioned, that we adapt ourselves very easily to this changing condition of social work, that we are a part of it. I think mobilization of our clients, it's very important, it's very central question, but also very challenging. Part of the discussions that you had, Adrian, about event researcher, for instance, Swan received information that teachers in Hungary, by Orban, teachers who are radical and critical are just expelling from universities. Bolsonaro in Brazil did the same. And research shows that in Sweden, they are under attack very much. They are not being responsible for the entire courses, entire program. They should just have some, as Jessica showed, a course somewhere, just have a lecture somewhere. So I think all those questions are interconnected in the field of social work, in different fields of social work. What we do, we need discussions. We need input from everybody. Will somebody, for instance, in Hungary, a teacher who are teaching LGBT rights are just expelled from university the day after. So the guy needs organization, global, to make it obvious to support each other. So I think that whatever we say, how we do it, there is no simple answer to that. But of course, the answer is to organize ourselves to make what Marcus named as the critical mass. If we have 5 people in the same institution who are critical and radical, fine. It's not easy to just crush them. But it's 1 left, 2 left, so it's much easier. Or if we have a social movement, global movement of radical and critical social workers. For instance, in United States, they participated directly in the Black Lives Matter movement and make it very radical and changed, developed that we need free healthcare for people. For instance, Boston group of Swan and Boston Liberation Health is one of the fantastic organizations which created really and is working. So we have possibilities to learn from each other, but we need room for discussions and to get together. Of course, maybe some of questions we are not addressing here because of the time limits and anything else, but it's a starting point to say that we need another kind of social work. We need another word than a neoliberal market fundamentalism. We have the goal, so we have to go get together and make it. And I think it's, of course, given the individuality of each of us, we feel ourselves very alone, very, very, subjected to this different kind of symbolic violence. But at the same time, we know that there are many in our situations. Can we go together? I think we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Masoud. And with that message from Masoud, which was really, really nice and very giving in different ways, we have to close the session that we have for today. It's now 5 o'clock, and I just put in the chat the Swedish Social Action Network for the Swedish for the group, and those that from the rest of Scandinavia that wants to also to join us in the Facebook, the Social Arbetets Aktionsnätverk. And one of the rooms that we have is this Social Action Network here in Sweden, and we will continue with creating spaces for these kind of issues related to social work, neoliberalism, and other oppressive systems that we live in. So thank you very much for your attention, for your participation, engagement, and I send you the best of good lucks for all of you. Thank you
Thank
very much for
Adrian.
today.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a nice time now.